Hi everyone. We finished off in class with the example of melanistic moths, and I wanted to give you a few other examples of evolution in action because often you simply hear about the moth melanistic example and not any other examples, despite the fact that evolution is surrounding us and occurring all the time. So two examples that I'm going to provide are around directional selection, that is selection that ends up evolving in particular directions naturally, simply because of the natural selection pressures that are being imposed on plants or animals. Then I'll talk a little bit about artificial selection. Artificial selection is another word for crop breeding, but we do it in a variety of contexts, not simply around crops or animals. In some cases, we as humans are imposing selection on natural populations that inhabit our own bodies as well. So we'll give you an example of antibiotic resistance of guppies, dogs, cats, and horses, and then plants. So here's what I mean when I'm talking about directional selection. Directional selection changes the average value of a trait through time. It's evolution, right? So on the x-axis of this top graph, we have the value of a trait. You can see that term right down here. And this particular graph describes the phenotypic distribution of a population before selection has occurred. So this might be the frequency of individuals of a different heights. It might be, so here is short people, here are tall people. This could be short tail length and long tail length, early flowering and late flowering, okay? But this is the shape of the distribution. So in this case, there are very few individuals with short tails and very few individuals with long tails, but many, many, many individuals with average length tails, okay? The next graph describes what happens during selection in terms of reproductive success, because remember, we have to link a trait to reproduction, okay, and reproduction. So in evolution, we call fitness or reproductive success W for short. So in this case, we have individuals that either have low reproductive success or low survival, and individuals that have high reproductive success and high survival, or high survival, one of the two or a combination of. And then we have many individuals with very intermediate reproductive or survival success. You can see the distribution is similar. There's a normal distribution of folks, but after selection, we will see a change in the value of that trait, so that selection will show this change in the mean value of the trait. So the mean changed from this spot to this point, and you can see that it increased. The average value of a trait increased in the population by this distance through one generation. That is directional selection. For example, directional selection caused the average body size to increase in a cliff swallow population simply through a significant mass mortality event. So we could see that the population before selection, and somebody went out and measured body size in swallows, varied between small to large, and in that the original population that they measured was 2,800 2,800 swallows. In contrast, after a mass mortality event, the survivors, I think it was due to frost, but I could be wrong, had a much smaller range of body sizes, and you can see that the average body size increased in response to that selection event. That's directional selection. We also impose directional selection on a regular basis in cod. So we as a group of individuals that hunt or predate other organisms. So Atlantic cod suffered a 99% decline in population between 1962 and 1992. There was a professor at Dalhousie University out East Coast, Jeff Hutchings, who estimated that 2 billion cod died during that 30-year period. Where'd they go? We ate them. I mean, among other things, but we ate a lot of them. Because with our nets, we tended to catch very large cod, and very large cod tend to be older. And so when we started looking at the population, they had to mature at a larger size. So they took, so they didn't reproduce until a larger size, or they were a greater age that were likely to be caught before they were able to reproduce. When we noticed that some cod were small, but they were still reproducing, those cod matured early at a smaller size and had greater reproductive success, and also they didn't get caught in our nets. And so the result was, from fishing alone, we imposed strong directional selection for early maturing small adult cod. This is interesting because our portion sizes generally don't change, and so we had to catch more cod in order to satisfy the portion sizes that we had become accustomed to eating. So here's an example. 30 years ago, huge Atlantic cod were like this size. Look at that guy. This is the same man. Look at that curly hair right there. This is the same man holding up a cod. He is not dwarfed by that cod in any sense of the word. Yeah. The average size of Atlantic cod is much smaller today, and that's not because the environment is terrible for it to grow in. It's because we imposed selection for smaller body size to mature earlier so they could still reproduce. We also imposed selection on color in guppies, and we impose it in our own aquaria, but we also have noticed that the reason why guppies originally had these diverse tails was because of natural selection. So just to be clear, the diversity in tail color is a result of natural selection, and certainly the research that has been accomplished on Trinidadian guppies in their small river streams suggests that predators and mating displays play a significant role in the coloration of guppies. Females prefer to mate with brightly colored males. In contrast, predators prefer to eat brightly colored males, and so they can survive better in response to predation if they're dull colored, but they may not have reproductive success if they're unless they're bright colored. It's this trade-off. However, once we brought Trinidadian guppies to our fish tanks, we started imposing selection for larger tail sizes than you can see in natural populations. It's kind of phenomenal. We've also imposed selection for a wide diversity of traits in dogs. Look at how wildly different these organisms look. That's because we have imposed different selection for their behavior, in large part is behavior, so their docility, their tendency to herd or not, their tendency to be familiars or pet lap dogs or not, their tendency to hunt or not. All of these dogs, their morphologies reflect both the need for us to impose selection for a docile, friendly dog, but also for a dog that may have working activities that it's required to do. Same with cats. You can see a wide diversity of morphologies in cats that we have imposed selection on them to get this wide diversity of morphologies. It's fascinating. Same with horses. Depends on whether we need a workhorse or a pet horse or a long distance runner or a short distance runner. All of these organisms reflect the kind of selection we have imposed on these populations in order to work with these organisms in our daily lives. There are a wide diversity of selection pressures on cows, interestingly, but the most important divergence you will see in the cow industry, beef industry, is depending on whether we are selecting cows for dairy or for beef/meat. And so you'll see very different body types in terms of their morphology. The cows on the left are all beef cattle, the cows on the right are all dairy cattle, and there's a very different capacity to produce milk as well as to produce lean muscle. Animals aren't the only place we've imposed selection. There's a wide diversity of peppers that you can purchase, all of which are the same species. This is all Capsicum annuum. And through artificial selection, breeding in our gardens, breeding on our farms, we as a humanity, and in particular certain cultures, have diversified the availability of capsicum plants and fruits. We also see a wide diversity of brassica plants such that we can eat brassica for a wide diversity of uses. There's a wild mustard that we have diversified. This diagram doesn't even include mustard, which is another one of the uses that we see, although it is a hybrid with another species. Brassica oleracea is hybridized with another to get the crop mustard. But you can see kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, and kale. They are all derived from the same species. We name these all Brassica oleracea, and what artificial selection has done is selected for different phenotypic traits in order for us to consume them in a particular way.